In this how-to, we're going to talk about the first flight state and SIMVARs, basically controlling the start location of your aircraft and the start state of your aircraft. I've talked about it a lot in other videos, but I'm going to talk about all the different first flight states in detail in this video. We just need a flight plan to start with. I'll just go ahead and download one off the website. I think, yeah, the Iditarod is still our featured download on the community page. By the way, you can now rate and review any of these flight plans. So if you have some favorites out there, do us a favor and come back and review. So let me open the Iditarod. And the reason I chose this flight plan is because it's really too long to fly in one leg in an X-Cub anyway. It's a 600, almost 700 mile flight. So I've been ending up flying it in legs. What I've been doing is, rather than creating a separate flight plan for each leg like a bush trip, I've just been respawning at each airport as I stop along the way. And I do that with the first flight state. This one starts at Anchorage, so let's actually talk about airport flight states first. So the first thing you want to do is open your flight settings, and we're only going to focus on the lower half of this screen today. So we're going to talk about first flight state and what all these options mean, which is going to lead us to discuss the departure and arrival sections and the SIMVARs section. Okay, so let's start simple. Flight runway is the most common one that you'll see, because a lot of the time when you're ready to get in and fly, you just want to start on the runway, ready to take off. That's what flight runway is. So this flight plan out of the box is flight runway for the X-Cub with skis at Anchorage International. So let's just go ahead and load that. My plane is on the runway, running, ready to take off. Now I'm off center, or I'm crooked a little bit because I messed with my start position. I manually moved my start position at Anchorage, and I didn't bother straightening myself out. If we get in the aircraft, my flaps are set for takeoff. In this case, my landing lights are not on. I don't remember if I saved it that way or if the X-Cub normally starts that way. Sometimes, like in the commercial aircraft, if you're flight runway, I believe the runway lights are on and the taxi lights are off. My flight plan is loaded and we're ready to take off at the end of the runway that we asked for. Coming straight out of Flight Simulator, if you selected flight runway, the simulator will choose your departure iCal and put you at the takeoff position on that runway. We'll talk about flight cruise last, but let's talk about Preflight Gate. Let's just move our aircraft. We'll leave it at Preflight Gate, and let's take our X-Cub. We'll zoom way in. I'm sure Anchorage has plenty of places to park. And we'll switch to satellite, and we don't want to park too far from the runway. Looks like there's some parking right there. Let's park at a gate. And I'm going to tell Flight Simulator yes to this last prompt so that it moves my aircraft to the gate. And I think we need to zoom in a little bit further. Yeah, so I'm going to put myself right here. Okay, so that's C3. Let's just use C3 since that one's painted. All right, so we're going to steal this gate. And we're going to tell our flight settings to be Preflight Gate, and let's find out the correct gate number. I've done this enough that I can probably guess what that gate should say, but they're different from airport to airport sometimes. Flight plan is going to spawn you where you dropped your pin regardless. But if you want ATC to know what gate you're at, you need to give it the correct nomenclature. This is really gate number 3 and we're in C. But I can tell you that that's not going to be the correct nomenclature for Anchorage. In fact, that's probably not correct for any airport. So I'm going to save my position right there, but I'm also going to go into Flight Simulator, go back to the main menu, and we'll zoom way in and actually pick parking, C2, C3. You really don't have any way that I'm aware of to control the options. Oh, let's set our aircraft to be the same as what we're using. I think it was the X-Cub with skis. Okay, so I've basically got the exact same flight plan. Well, I don't know. Let's see, our next waypoint Well, I ended up landing at Finger Lake, which is not an airport anyway. So we'll just say we're going to McGrath, since it's the next consecutive one with an ICAO code. We didn't want 25 left, we wanted 33. Runway 33, and now I think it lost my parking spot by doing that. This is what's so hard about working with world map. If you really want to specify your runway and your parking, I'm not sure I can do that. So once I set the parking, it gives me the gate, but we'll see what runway it gives us. I think it had us on 25 left for some reason. There's very little control over how you spawn. You can pick a runway, you can pick a parking, you can pick a gate. Here they've actually got water, so you could spawn on the water in a floats aircraft. And then you could just drop your pin somewhere and say set your departure randomly somewhere. But it doesn't really let you define anything about that push pin. That's where Flight Plan comes in handy. But we're gonna save, well, see, it moved us back to 25 left, which is not what I wanted. But we'll go ahead and save what we've got. If I now open that flight plan, we lost our imagery because it's following my aircraft. When you're in your hangar, you're on the equator. Microsoft Flight Simulator has put our push pin for the airport basically at our spawn position that we wanted, which was effectively the same spawn position we had chosen. Oh, I should open them both up. Okay, so here's our Iditarod where I have manually placed my aircraft at the gate. This is the one that we saved directly out of Flight Simulator, and it put us in the exact same spot. However, when we look at our flight settings, I said I wanted runway 33, which it's not giving me. It's not specifying any runway at all. I'll have to ask ATC for it. Or I can go ahead now that I'm in Flight Plan and select 33, and then if it has a designator, pick a designator. If it's none, Flight Plan will automatically set it to none. The concourse is not just C, it's gate C, and then sometimes you'll have a suffix like M for medium or H for heavy, or it might actually say heavy and medium if that's the case. Also, some of the other airports use all of this together in one string. Even large airports like, I think LAX, they just use purely numeric gate numbers, so you'll just have a number in there and that's it. In both of these flight plans, we've got sim on ground selected and pre-flight gate. This is the plain vanilla flight plan directly out of Flight Simulator. We're going to use our flight plan. So now that we switch back to my flight plan at the same parking spot, now we know the correct gate number. Remember, I wasn't sure, even though I was pretty sure it was going to be gate C, the gate number. Now the gate suffix was none, so it'll recognize none as none. You can see it's got me a heading of -30, which in actuality, if you start at 360, subtract 30, you come back to 330, right? Which is pointing down runway 33. We don't want to be pointing down runway 33. We want to be at 85 degrees, kind of in the right direction for the airport. Now, again, if you don't modify this flight plan directly out of Flight Simulator, what it will do is create an SPB file, which Flight Plan does not create. So that's specific to Flight Simulator, but if you look, it created an SPB file when I saved my flight plan out of World Map. Now, there's also an SPB file from the Iditarod, but that was saved, I don't know how long ago, at whatever original position in Anchorage it was saved with. So I honestly don't even need this SPB file anymore because it probably doesn't even match my Iditarod flight anymore. But they're included with most of the downloads, or some of the downloads, but they're not necessary to fly and use the flight plan. This MSFS direct SPB file is what actually contains our position that we selected on the airport. It will spawn us automatically pointed in the correct direction for this gate. But since I've manually manipulated all of this, I need to tell it, hey, I need to be pointing in a 90-ish degree position. We'll call it 85. And we're at Preflight Gate. In a commercial aircraft, that would probably be with external power on, or the APU, or both available. I don't know whether it would start you with the APU or external power. At an airport like Anchorage, you would almost certainly have external power, so that's how I assume it would spawn you. If you want to specifically set your aircraft to very particular settings, again, especially the commercial aircraft where there's, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of switch positions and so forth, there's another video on the how-to playlist on how to save all your aircraft settings. But I'm just going to worry about the direction and your first flight state, which is going to control whether you're running with your flaps set for takeoff or whether you're, probably in this case, we're probably going to be cold and dark at the gate and we'll have to start up. So let's go ahead and load this one and we'll take a look. And now we're parked at a gate. And in this case, our aircraft is running. Oh, no, it's not. They were teasing us. It put us where we asked for, right at the gate, pointed the direction we wanted to be pointed, and my guess was pretty good at 85 degrees. I didn't file an IFR flight plan, or I didn't create an IFR flight plan. Let's go ahead and fire up our battery at least. Okay, so you can request an IFR flight plan just based on the flight plan we have. We've set our runway number, so now ATC should at least know what runway we want, and that's also your departure position up here. I don't want to talk about the ATC settings a whole lot, but it's a little confusing because it's called departure position. This is actually your runway number, and that will also ensure that ATC knows where you want to go. But the important thing was to note that Preflight Gate started us at the gate, cold and dark, where we asked for. Again, I think in a commercial aircraft, you would probably be running, or at least you'd be connected to external power with your jets cold, I would expect. So let's take a look at the next one and say we want Preflight Holdshort. What that's going to do, it's going to tell Flight Simulator, again, the state of my aircraft. Hey, maybe we should pick up some sushi. Nothing on the rest of this route. Grab some Starbucks and some sushi. Let's go to satellite mode. Let's find our hold short. We wanted 33, so I'll drag my pin over here to 33's hold short. And then I'm going to reset my heading. Again, notice it automatically resets your heading based on your runway. So if you don't mess with your heading, it'll always be your requested runway heading. In other words, -30 equals 330 degrees. Again, I don't know why Flight Simulator saves them that way. Flight plan mimics that, but again, I can enter 330 and it gets me in the same direction. But just be aware that that's where this number is coming from. And it always assumes you're going to want to be flight runway. So unless you specifically set this to something else, flight plan assumes you're going to be on the ground at a runway, flight runway state of the aircraft. But we said we want Preflight Holdshort. We've placed our aircraft at the Holdshort for 33. We can leave the gate number because we've said we're not at Preflight Gate. So even though I've got my gate numbers in there, it's going to ignore them. It's going to take us directly to Preflight Holdshort. And I want to be facing probably in a 270-ish degree direction. Okay, and this is all my Iditarod flight I'm still working with. So now let's load this flight. And this time I'm not even going to go back to main menu. I point that out because sometimes Flight Simulator tries to do you a favor and save some aircraft settings depending on the aircraft and depending on the airport, and there's a lot of variables to that. But sometimes it tries to help you out, but it ends up not helping you out. If you're not getting the settings that you've expected, you may have to go all the way back to world map, and there's a reset option I'll show in a moment to just reset the flight plan to make sure it rereads everything from scratch. Now we're spawned at the hold short of 33. You can see we're running again, and we've already been cleared for takeoff by ATC. Our flaps are set. Our taxi lights are probably, we don't have taxi lights in this aircraft, but landing lights are still off. But you're ready to taxi on out to the runway and go ahead and take off. Our next flight state is Preflight Pushback. So now this is going to be similar to Preflight Gate, but you're already going to be running and ready for the tug to push you back from the gate. Again, this is more useful in commercial aircraft or, like a caravan or a Beechcraft, King Air. Preflight Pushback will tell Flight Simulator that you're at this gate waiting to be pushed back. You're already started up, you've done whatever you're going to do at the gate, and you're waiting for the tug to push push you back. I need to drag myself back over to the gate. You could start over from scratch and pick your gate in world map, but then you're going to lose everything else. So to me, it's just easier to just drag my pin back over here, remember to say yes to that last prompt, and then reset to whatever direction I want to be facing. We decided 85 degrees was pretty good for that spot. When I reset my pin position, it resets my first flight state to flight runway, because most commonly that's what you want. Okay, that's part of what that last prompt does. But we're going to be in pushback. We're still on the ground. We still want runway 33, but we're back at gate C3. And in my case, I'm pointed 85 degrees, which will be pointed about correct for our gate. So I'm going to save those changes, again, using the exact same flight plan I've been using the whole time. And we'll just reload this straight from the cockpit. As long as it's going to let me get away with it, I'm going to continue to do it from here. And now we're spawned at the gate, back where we asked for, underneath the nose wheel of this 737, or whatever it is. In this case, we're ready to be pushed back. So our ATC's open, it's waiting for us to contact ground services to get pushed back, or just ask for clearance to taxi out to the runway, or both. But ATC's waiting for us to request pushback and request taxi. We're parked and started. And that's primarily all the fixed wing states, except for flight cruise, which is the last one we're going to talk about. These last two at the bottom, rotorcraft departure, is what it sounds like. It's a helicopter already started, ready to hover, I guess. I don't know a lot about the helicopters. I don't know if it'll recognize flight runway. I would assume it does. But if you start up on a helipad, you get rotorcraft departure. You can also use this if you just want to randomly spawn a helicopter, at the end of your street. You can do that, set it to rotorcraft departure, and your helicopter will spawn at the end of your cul-de-sac, ready to go. Waiting is typically just used for games, like if you're in the Reno Air races, but before you've actually started the race, it'll have a status of waiting. So there's really nothing for me to show on those. But the next flight state will be flight cruise, and this is where we're going to have a bunch of options. Let's just say I want to spawn in a random spot on Earth. I'm going to spawn somewhere in Anchorage, see if we can find a Walmart or something. I'm trying to find an empty parking lot here somewhere so I don't spawn inside someone's building. There's a good sized parking lot, or at least good enough for the X-Cub, at the corner of Greenland and Tudor. So we can just take our pin, and now it's asking me move Anchorage Airport to this position, which it will always ask you that just to make sure you didn't accidentally drag your push pin. But if it's an airport, it asks you again. It says, hey man, this is an airport. Are you sure you want to move this? Yes. And then, as we've been saying, if you want your aircraft placed there, you say yes. Hey, I was pretty close. Now, one thing I should probably do, the satellite is going to be tilted, especially for Anchorage, as far north as it is. The satellite imagery is going to be tilted towards the equator. So I'm going to make sure that I spawn somewhere out away from the building, because I don't want to end up under a carport or something. And then let's point ourselves out towards the driveway. So we'll say we're in flight cruise this time because I'm off the airport grounds. Even though I'm on the ground, I need to uncheck sim on ground. This checkbox right here is kind of a misnomer. It's more important than just whether you're on the ground or not. It tells Flight Simulator whether to look here at your departure information and set you somewhere here based on what your first flight state is. Even in flight cruise, even if I set flight cruise and leave myself on the ground, I'm going to end up at the airport. Okay, or at least that's what Flight Simulator thinks we're going to do. You can drag your pin wherever you want to drag it. Even though I want to start on the ground, I'm off the airport grounds and I'm in flight cruise, although you could actually use flight runway as well. In this case, I want to start on the ground and I want my aircraft running, but because we're talking about flight cruise, I'll use flight cruise. Basically, if you're going to use flight cruise, you almost certainly need to uncheck sim on ground. If you have sim on ground checked, you probably want to use Preflight Runway, Preflight Gate, Preflight Holdshort, Preflight Pushback, or rotorcraft departure. You can also use flight cruise, which is what I'm going to do. And now I'm not on the airport grounds anymore, so what happened when I said yes to that third prompt, it reset the latitude and longitude of my aircraft to be out there in the middle of that parking lot at, Greenland and Tudor. And I'm going to leave my altitude at 0, so that'll just spawn me at whatever the ground altitude is at that point in space. Now, once you start setting altitudes, you need to be careful because this is above mean sea level. So if you're spawning in a mountain airport and you choose an altitude that's too low for the runway, you're going to end up spawning inside the runway underground and crash immediately. If you're not absolutely sure or you just don't care, you want to spawn on the ground, leave it at 0. And as we've been talking about, you set your heading so that your aircraft's pointed in the direction you want it. And in this case, I'm going to ignore my departure and arrival information entirely because it's going to be irrelevant in flight cruise. Again, we'll save our flight plan, go back into the cockpit. I'm going to go back to the main menu in this case because I've been reloading flight plans, and it's starting to make me nervous that Flight Simulator is probably caching some of those settings for me. So I'm going to go ahead and reset. So especially when you're doing flight cruise and things don't come up the way you expect, it's a good time to reset because Flight Simulator is probably trying to do you a favor, but ultimately it's not doing you a favor. I don't know why we're crooked. There must be some weird elevation data. Oh, you know what? I wonder if I didn't notice. Oh no, thought maybe I accidentally set a pitch or a bank. You can set those values if you wish to have your aircraft tilted, but it looks like we got some squirrely elevation data here. It spawned me in the parking lot I asked for, pointed the direction I wanted to be pointed, and then because I'm in flight cruise, it's going to be immediately wanting to take off, or it's expecting, whoops, didn't have my hands and feet on the controls, but you're going to be moving. Flight cruise is flight cruise. If I want to just be parked in that parking lot, I want to use one of my other states that we've already talked about. Flight Runway, Preflight Gate, Holdshort, or Pushback. And essentially, since we're not on the airport grounds anymore, the only significance any of these are going to have is whether my aircraft is cold and dark or whether it's already started. The real advantage of flight cruise is to put in an altitude. Now, Anchorage is largely at sea level. I could certainly go back to my map and use my contour lines to determine the actual elevation of the ground I'm sitting on, but I can tell you in Anchorage 1,000 feet is going to be plenty to be up away from the buildings. This is how Flight Simulator expects altitudes to be formatted. So I'm going to keep my same heading. I'm not on the ground, and now I'm in flight cruise. All right, and we're spawned in flight at 1,000 feet, pointed at, I think it was 270 due west, obviously with the aircraft running. Now, the other thing I should point out, this time I'm going to be prepared with my controls. Once you click ready to fly, in the case of the X-Cub, it has an autopilot. So as soon as we spawn, it's going to spawn us at the heading we asked for, an altitude we asked for, but with the autopilot on and my throttles at full, okay? But my skis should be up in this case, and they are. And all I need to do is turn off my autopilot and take control of the aircraft. That was really just to demonstrate the functionality. Now that we've gotten through all of the information I wanted to cover, what I would actually do is, let's say I didn't modify my start position. I just took off at Anchorage. I downloaded the flight directly off the website and decided to fly the Iditarod. We're back on the ground. We're at Flight Runway. I'm at Anchorage. I'm on runway 33. The gate's irrelevant. And let's say that I took off and then I flew to Finger Lake and I landed there, and actually I've taken off from Finger Lake and landed at McGrath. If you're going to duplicate that, you may want to pick something with some anti-icing, because I iced up coming through Rainy Pass, or actually I iced up out here. I was over 2,000 feet and that was enough to ice me up. Okay, but I believe McGrath was the last airport I landed at. Oh no, I haven't made it to McGrath yet. I landed at Nikolai. So this is really where I'm picking up. There's two ways to respawn your aircraft. I'm going to show you the quote-unquote hard way first, and then I'll show you an even easier way. But let's say I want to be spawned at this end of the runway, ready to take off, because I landed at Nikolai and I parked over here on my last leg. So I just want to pick up from here and fly the rest of my flight, or at least another leg of it, because like I said, this is too long to fly in the X-Cub in a single leg. It's more like probably 5 or 6 legs. So if I drop a pin, I can create a waypoint, but I actually don't care. I just want the coordinates. I can copy those to my clipboard, and now I can manually go through and do what Flight Plan does for me when I drag my first pin around. I can reset my latitude. I copied my latitude and longitude, so I need to cut my longitude out of that first field and paste it into the longitude field. And because I just copied it directly out of the new point dialog box, there's going to be a comma in there. You need to make sure you delete that comma or it's going to blow up. Okay. In this case, I'm going to leave my altitude at 0 because I want to be on the ground. But remember what I said, I can't be on the ground. Otherwise, it's going to spawn me back at Anchorage no matter what I set this latitude and longitude to. I'm going to leave it at flight runway because I am on the runway. I want to be started, I want my flaps deployed, and I want to be ready to take off. But again, just to reiterate, intuitively you would think you want to be on the ground, but you don't. And then in this case, it still has us set at a heading for runway 33. Now, this is not numbered on the dirt, but runway is actually paved in Flight Simulator. I'm going to call that 250. And now we'll go ahead and load this one. Okay, Flight Simulator crashed on me before I was able to load that flight plan, but it did get as far as loading my aircraft out of position. So before I reloaded, I just want to make a quick point that if you're in flight and Flight Simulator crashes, or you crash into something in Flight Simulator, your last position is maintained by Flight Plan. Right now, I'm back at the main menu. If I turn GPS follow on right now, it's going to drop my aircraft back at the equator, which is your default position. If I was in mid-flight, let's say, I had just spent the last 3 hours getting here and I want to finish the rest of it, I don't want to restart, I want to pick up where I left off. Even if that was in the middle of nowhere, all I have to do is zoom in closely enough to my aircraft that I can drop a pin in the vicinity, and that's my spawn position. Okay, so you can copy that and do exactly the same thing we did to set our position at Nikolai Aerodrome. This could be a position anywhere in the world. So if I want to pick up in flight, mid-flight, on a route I was flying that got interrupted, just set your sim not to be on the ground, the position you want, the altitude, and the heading, and set yourself to flight cruise. Now remember, I set myself to flight runway because I just want to take off at Nikolai here because that was where I landed. Okay, and we've spawned at the end of the runway at Nikolai. As I mentioned, I think earlier, it's actually a paved runway in Flight Simulator, unlike the satellite imagery. Well, I guess it may be tarmac, but in any case, it's paved, so it's not as rough as it looks on the map. And I'm ready to continue the rest of my Iditarod flight from here. I guess we'll jump in the cockpit. In this case, my lights are off. I would have to turn them on. I think in some of the larger aircraft, they may already be on for you, but my flaps will be set and I'm ready to take off. Now, I said that was the quote-unquote hard way. I mean, really, that's the way to take the most control over where and how your plane spawned. But for my example, if I had flown from Anchorage to Nikolai and just wanted to pick up at Nikolai Aerodrome tomorrow or whenever, all I would have to do is go into my flight plan, delete off all the leading waypoints, all the ones I've already flown. Now, when I save my new flight plan, I could either save it as a new one and save the old one. In this case, the old one's available on the website forever, so you can download it anytime you want. But notice what happens now is it set our departure to CP08 as if it's it's an airport. So now I can just take my push pin the same way I did in Anchorage, drag that back to where I want to take off from. This runway is not painted, so I don't know what the runway number is, but that looks to be 24 or 25. Notice what it's done. It's set us back on flight runway. It still has runway 33 from Anchorage. We haven't told it anything different. I'm going to guess that's 24 maybe. You know, you may be a few degrees off in either direction. Or you could set your exact heading. Again, if you're picky, notice what happens when I save. I'm going to save over the top of this same plan again. Now it's reset my heading based on runway 24, not runway 33. But now I'm ready to pick up where I left off. All my other waypoints are gone, but if I've already flown them, maybe I don't care. I'll just fly the rest of this. And I could have saved it as leg 2 or whatever and still preserve the original flight plan if I wanted to. The point was really to show all the different things you could do with your first flight state in conjunction with your sim on the ground checkbox and your sim vars, which is your latitude, longitude, pitch, bank, and heading, and of course your altitude. Generally don't use pitch and bank. And then your departure and arrival ICAO information if you're on the ground. The important takeaway is if you're using Flight Runway, Preflight Gate, Preflight Holdshort, Preflight Pushback, and possibly even rotorcraft departure, you're going to want your sim on ground checkbox checked, and it's just going to treat whatever's in this field as if it's an airport and spawn you appropriately. If you're going to start in flight cruise, it's going to assume you're in flight in autopilot if our aircraft is equipped, but it won't pick that up unless you uncheck sim on ground and then select or copy and paste your latitude and longitude. But anytime you want to start in the middle of a flight plan anywhere, whether you're physically on the ground or not, unless you want to start at that very first waypoint in your flight plan, you must unselect sim on ground. Again, you can cheat and use Flight Runway, even though Flight Simulator's not going to recognize that you're on a runway. It's going to go ahead and start you as if you are. You can go see the Iditarod flight where I took off from Finger Lakes, basically in the weeds, in the snow with the skis down. That's how to use your first flight state to control how you spawn and where you spawn in Flight Simulator. You can download the Iditarod flight plan at simflightplan.com/community right now. It's our community download, but I'll include the link straight to the download in the description box. Also, if you'd like to give Flight Plan a try, it's at simflightplan.com/flightplan. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.